Learn how leaders can develop their emotional intelligence to grow themselves, their teams, and their businesses. Winning with Carolyn Stern, CEO of EI Experience, on today's episode of the Executive Wins Podcast. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so you can get inspired and grow your business. Here's your host, Gordon Shepherd. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so that you can get inspired and grow your business. I'm your host, Gordon Shepherd. And to start the show, I want to share a leadership lesson that I learned from Mike McCormick, president of World Floor Coverings, on episode 54. He showed us why it is so important for leaders to take calculated risks, especially when they are buying a business. Well, that's because when he acquired World Floor Coverings, he already had 8 years of experience in the flooring business, along with supportive family and friends. He also had the support of the people he was buying the business from. So even though he had to mortgage his house to start the financing, he knew he was in the best possible position to realize his dream. Take well-calculated risks. It's just one of dozens of leadership lessons that you'll get when you go back in our back catalog on the Executive Wins Podcast. Another reason to listen? Well, the Executive Wins Podcast won the Best New Podcast Award in the Quill Podcasting Awards in its first year of production. And thanks to you, the Executive Wins Podcast has more than 43,000 views on YouTube and more than 22,000 minutes of watch time, along with having over 1,700 downloads on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen. Featuring mission-driven leaders sharing their biggest wins so that you can get inspired and grow your business. That's what you get on the Executive Wins Podcast. On today's episode, you'll learn how leaders can develop their emotional intelligence to grow themselves, their teams, and their businesses. Winning with Carolyn Stern, CEO of EI Experience. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by our leadership team workshop called Aligned to Win: How to Build a High-Performance Leadership Team. In this workshop, leaders learn a proven system to help them consistently make better decisions so that they can achieve their goals. It's called The Anatomy of a Win, to help everyone on your team understand the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every major project that you take on. Imagine what would happen if every leader on your team is fully aligned and working hard to turn your goals into results. So if you want to break down silos and build a high-performance leadership team that makes your company more profitable, then get in touch with me directly at gord@executivewins.com. That's gord@executivewins.com. And now on to today's show. We are lucky to be joined by Carolyn Stern, CEO of EI Experience, a company that provides emotionally intelligent leadership development programs for modern teams and organizations. You can learn about their work at eiexperience.com. That's eiexperience.com. On this episode, you'll learn how Carolyn has focused decades of work and life experience to build a practical approach to emotional intelligence that helps leaders take action and get real results. You'll also learn about her tough upbringing and why she leads with vulnerability by sharing relatable stories from her own life that help audiences and her clients to feel safe and connect deeply so they can elevate their own emotional intelligence. You'll also hear at least 10 practical takeaways that you can implement immediately to grow as a leader. This episode is a masterclass in how to become self-aware and how to normalize being human at work. I also want to remind you that this interview follows a specific format that I created called The Anatomy of a Win to help you learn the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every business win that you hear on this show. I really do hope that you can use this approach to reach your next business milestone. And now here's Carolyn Stern with her executive win. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Hi, and thanks for having me.
Well, we are just so lucky to have someone in here who is a true impact person across North America and around the world. I've seen you in action speaking at a conference. I've seen you in action and the people around your table at a conference with you signing books and seeing. I was stunned at seeing transformation happen in seconds, your ability to exchange with people and then really honestly influence them and witness that is, something that I've sort of had firsthand knowledge with, along with, learning a little bit about some of the work that you've done. But there's a lot of people that haven't met you. So if you had to introduce yourself to them, what would you say?
My name's Carolyn Stern, and I'm an emotional intelligence speaker, trainer, and author.
I think that's unfair and a little bit modest for what you've done. Like, give me an example of if I saw you at a conference, because I've seen your demo as an
Yep.
example. If people go to carolynstern.com and check it out, you're in some of the biggest stages, making some of the biggest impacts. You're also in small rooms. You're doing these workshops.
Yep.
You're doing what you do.
Yep.
When I get an experience with you, I have to really help me paint the picture. Like, you walk onto that stage. What happens when you're interacting with an audience, and how are you really transforming their emotional state and lives?
I think by being vulnerable and letting people know that I too struggle with this. It's not like I was born with emotionally intelligent parents and I'm gifted in this area. I've been spending over 25 years studying this. So 9 out of 10 times I'm in the driver's seat of my feelings, but there's still that 1 out of 10 time that my emotions take over. So because I'm pretty real on stage, yes, I'm an academic and have my background in academia, but I think I talk human. And because I share, I call them wobbly bits on stage. I share what I struggle with. I'll never forget getting 3 emails from 3 different students 10 minutes before my last class, and I'm sick, my dog ate my homework, and all of those things. And I was so angry. And the funny thing was, I stomped into my classroom and it was my emotional intelligence class. And I stood there at the back of the class and said, okay, you're up, do your presentation. And then, if I'm being honest, I went into full drill sergeant. My last name is Stern. I was certainly living my name. And the students could feel my wrath, right? So we all leave an emotional wake behind. So they could feel my emotions. And because of that, they were scared. And one by one, they went up and did their final assignment. And if I'm being honest, I'm not proud of this. I probably gave them more critical feedback than positive. And I was pretty direct and harsh. And then halfway through the class, I did what I teach others to do. I zoomed out and went, what the hell are you doing? You're angry at the wrong students. These are the brave ones that showed up. But what that lesson taught me, and why I share this in class, on stage and in my classes and in my workshops, is what I didn't know is that dishonesty is a big trigger of mine. And why? Because my dad was a pretty dishonest man. And so when those 3 emails came into my inbox, it had nothing to do with those 3 students. It had to do with my daddy issues. And what I try to remind people is when you're triggered at work, it tends to be because one of your value system, which is honesty for me, I value honesty. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of that. So I value it now. When your values are compromised at work, it tends to trigger you. And so if we can be aware of what our triggers are, which tend to be our when our value system is someone's rubbing up against it, then we can be ahead of it. So what the moral of the story was, know thyself, right? Know what triggers you. Pay attention to yourself. Had I zoomed out before I stomped into my classroom, I would have realized I was angry. And then created a bit of a pause in between my emotion and my response to those brave students that did show up. And finally, When you make a mistake, apologize. So halfway through the class, I owned up to my mistake, and the students' mouth dropped because they were shocked that their professor would have apologized publicly. But I'm a firm believer you've got to model the way. So when you make a mistake, you own it, you apologize for it. So that little example of one of the times when my emotions took over, I share on stage, and I think people can resonate, because how many of us have let our emotions run amok at work or at home and
There's a couple
regretted it
things
later?
coming up for me here now that just sort of jump in. One, thanks for having the lived experience and then the pulling it together to help others experience. People on this podcast are like 20 years in, 30 years into their game to be as eloquent as you've just been. That was a mini masterclass in like,
Thank
well, here's
you.
an example and here's what you do and here's how we do it. And somebody could take something immediately actionable away
Yeah.
from what you've just said. And you can hear, I mean, you know, your intentionality in that in terms of what you're doing. You're taking me back to being a young dad. I wish I
Mm,
knew. When I think
mm,
about my daughter, who's now 22, going on 23, and what I just didn't know, and it took me until about grade 4 when we started to figure out what was going on in her life and then what was going on there. The grace came later, but boy, oh boy, those early years with, again, those triggers, those expectations. And yes, I could take you back to my own parent stories that are a part of it. And so thank you for, in a sense, giving me permission to articulate.
mm, mm.
You know, you said this is it, and this is what's related, and we know. And so suddenly you gave me a pathway almost immediately, so I can imagine being in the audience
Mm.
there, or if I could have been the one getting a an autograph at your book table. I can see how you connect in there really quickly. You're doing your thing. We hear the academics in behind there, and I'm sure a lot of people can go deeper on the biography to learn more about what you're doing. But we got a good flavor now. That's great. So it leads
Yeah.
me to sort of our first question in this podcast format, anyway, is to say, if you had to describe in all this work that you've done, your biggest win, what would that win be, and how would you describe it?
It's hard to point to just one single win in my career, because for me, the true win has been the journey, a 20 plus year evolution of really my impact, growth, and purpose driven work. So, however, that said, there's a couple of milestones that I think really stand out. So, one of the biggest long term wins has been in my early decision to invest in creating online emotional intelligence courses well before online learning was popular or as mainstream as it is today. So, well before it was cool. At the time, it was a bit of a gamble because people question whether deep emotional could be taught online effectively and self-directed. But I believed in the content. I'm living proof of why I'm so passionate about emotional intelligence is this changed my life. And so I know this can be taught, and the process and the power of EQ. So these courses built years ago are still selling at record rate. And that tells me something important, that technology can change, but the fundamentals of emotional intelligence are the same. Self awareness, empathy, emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness never go out of style. And I think organizations are hungry to develop those human centered skills in their people.
That makes so much sense. So you were pioneering in a sense in early days. And it's funny because we could go back, there would be some tech nightmares in there where you had to get courses loaded up. Do you know what I mean? If we
Oh
talked about,
yeah. And
right?
you know what again, talk about a journey. I remember spending $125,000 on the design, on the production. I mean, these are Hollywood quality videos. I had a 9-person production team. We were on location, like different locations now. With all you need is a podcast mic and an in-house studio, you can do it much cheaper. But I really felt quality was important. The mistake that I made back then is I was, if you build it, they will come. And that's not what happened, right? I spent all my money on how pretty the videos were and how good the content was, but I spent no money on marketing. And so my second win, where I think I made the most significant win, was publishing my book, The Emotionally Strong Leader, and which really captures much of what I've learned over 2 decades of teaching at the university, coaching clients, and leading organizations and leading their people to lead their organizations. And it's been rewarding work to see leaders around the world resonating with this message that emotions are not a liability at work. Like, if I could tell you the one key message from the book is that emotions are not the enemy. You need to make friends with their feelings, their data points, and they truly could be your superpower if we learn to be in the driver's seat of our emotions rather than our emotions driving us. So
And
that
some people get into that driver's seat and some people never get into it. What you do is through your coaching and the outreach and the resources that you're providing is massive impact. I can't even imagine sort of if we go to revenue alone, the loosening that you would create within organizations for them to get control of themselves and their emotions. The 360 I know that I take in the coaching work
Yep.
and advisory work that I do, you would be a huge piece of not just that in their work lives, but obviously in their whole lives. You're extending lifetimes and you're helping, you would know the impacts of stories that you would have had on relationships and how that goes. It just must be unlimited.
And so rewarding to hear that, mostly I work with senior executives or mid-level managers or sometimes even frontline managers, but to hear, a C-suite executive saying his relationship with his son changed dramatically after, having those honest conversations that I encouraged him to have and get vulnerable with his son, or to say another uh, client of mine would say, you've changed my marriage. I have more intimacy with my partner. Or, another professional saying, I finally was able to speak up to my boss and to say, what he was doing was disrespectful. And it landed well and he heard me and, my relationship improved. So to me, I think emotional intelligence is the answer to any personal or interpersonal problem out there. And the book, I purposely created it as a work style guide. So halfway through the book, I take people through my six step method, which includes 11 worksheets in the book. And inside, at the end of the book, there's a QR code that takes you to a whole series of videos and an additional workbook. So it's truly a book and a half. But I wanted to give readers, because not everyone can afford to hire me as a coach. Not everyone can afford to bring me in as their trainer for their organization. I wanted to make sure my online courses taught me that people wanted to hear this, and I wanted to give people a resource that they could have at their fingertips. And I'm really proud of what came out of it.
Congratulations. I mean, how neat that you've got the motivation to maximize your impact. That's not just saying, oh, I'm just going to go hang out with the C suite folks on the weekend, which you're already making an impact, which is great because that goes top down with getting your message to flow. You're
Yeah.
reaching all different levels of an organization, but you're also reaching a wider audience because you understand the importance of it. And if I say sort of the context of our geopolitical times,
Yes.
you're making a dent. Like
Yes.
the work that you're doing to build capacity in individuals and in organizations is massively needed. And funny if we pull out to the macro for a second,
Yeah.
we're a bit stunted in our emotional intelligence as countries.
Oh,
As
absolutely.
as whole societies, we are missing the lessons that you're already brought into this conversation and more, and you can hear it. And then you've also put it in an accessible way. You've
Yes.
got the university experience. It could all be academic and cited, which could get certain people excited. But no, you've got it in a way that's accessible. Those
Yes.
worksheets, you can hear the practicality that so many people would, gain the benefit from just picking up your book and going through that process. Well, what a gift that you've found what is truly sounding like a mission-driven life, like a whole
It
life
really
that,
has been. It really
yeah.
has been, and you said it yourself. We're more politically divided and emotionally charged than ever before, and that's. I'm just writing about it in my second book right now about the how this is so relevant not only in the workplace but in our home lives when generations are now living, multiple generations are living under one roof, right? We've got grandparents living with their children. I think I get asked a lot about multi-generational leadership, right? The Gen Zs, so 27 and unders, have studies show have a different emotional makeup than us as a Gen X. And if I'm leading a Z, I can't just do what I would do because they don't necessarily have the same emotional makeup. And the one thing that I was going to say, because we did sit beside each other at the conference and you got to see the impact. I started offering 15-minute coaching sessions at my booth. And I wasn't sure, are people going to come up and want to talk to me about an emotional issue? And I was shocked to see that in 15 minutes, we got right to the heart of the issue. Because I know, having done this work for over 2 decades, I know the kinds of questions to ask to kind of get to the heart of the issue. The challenge in the workplace, leaders don't know how to do that. And so a lot of times when someone comes into your office with a problem, either you're thinking, okay, do I need to solve? Do I put on my problem solving hero cape and come in and save the day, or do I coach them through the problem so that they unearth the solution themselves? And a lot of people don't know how to coach with emotional intelligence, which is again why I built a whole course on it.
Well,
But
and
I,
I'll just jump in to see, having seen the 15-minute thing in action, I was
yeah, yeah,
stunned. I mean, these people were, you were there's your skill set to connect with someone very, very quickly. And
yes,
like you said, get to the heart of the matter. And I wonder I hope that's rubbed off in as many people as possible, because if I, in that practice of joy for facilitation, I know that I have, there's not a lot of people that are dedicated to facilitating at that level. Like when you're
yes,
talking about this black belt, double black belt
yeah,
level of emotional intelligence
yeah,
that you're talking about. And then to do it in 15 minutes, you can get a lot done in 15 minutes if you've got that
totally,
right way. Because you can hear that you set a safe space immediately. The
yes.
people would be able to know that they can trust you in a confidential manner and get to the heart of what they need to get to very, very quickly. Well, wow, we could have this
And
9-hour conversation. This is lucky.
And a quick tip for your listeners is this. So when someone comes into your office and wants to kind of complain about the problem, here's what I do to put some limits around it. After about 5 minutes of them venting, I say in 12 words or less, what's the issue? And then if they can't come up with the issue, I say, you know what? Go back, go away, think about it, come back to me once you know what the issue is. Then once they know what the issue is, then we move into solution. Because so often, so many of us can focus on problem, right? Whatever you focus on grows, right? If you focus on the problem grows. If we focus on solutions, solutions grow. So for about 5 minutes, I let them talk about, give me context of what's going on. And then I ask them in 12 words or less, what's the real issue? A lot of time, what that real issue is what are they afraid of? And when we get to fear, what are they fearing? That's really the main point.
And if we could just remember that before we then have to have that hour-long
That's right.
manager-employee conversation, which no one in the situation has sort of the skill set to navigate. What
And
you've
it's
just
not
done is
your job.
you've given us a box. Like, we can actually put this into some parameters
Exactly.
to make it kind of work in the context of a work day, because
And
we don't
it's not
have, right?
it's not your job to be someone's emotional therapist. Quite frankly, most of us are not qualified. But what we can do is say, what's the issue? What are you feeling? What is that feeling telling you about you, the others, and the situation? And what are you going to do about it? And how can I support you? If you ask those few questions, people can unearth a whole bunch of things, but we've got to figure out what's really getting in their way of where they are now and where they wish to be.
I was teaching a workshop the other day, and someone said, "Oh, I have an open door policy." I said, "Shut the door." Like, I'm just this thing of like, I can talk to anybody for any length of time. And, oh, I do work on the weekends and at home. Like what you're talking about quickly, you can see you're
Yes,
coming into the situation. You're helping them to guard their own emotional and sort of energy limits by when we hear 12 words, when we hear 15 minutes. These
that's
are
right.
things that make sense and are very translational into a workplace setting. And you can hear all of your backup. Thank you for the 20 years. So this 20-year overnight success story, in a sense, is what I think the win is, if I can take on, and we've
Yes,
already heard some highlights along the way,
sure.
big ones, like those massive investment in online training when it wasn't a thing, a pioneer
Yep,
in online training, and then putting everything into the book that you wanted to write, that now is having a major impact. And then
yep.
the second book is on its way, and we can hear those things too. Wonderful. So 20-year overnight success story. Let's jump into what I call the anatomy of a win, and look at the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind it. When we look at strategy, we talk about values, vision, mission.
Yep.
That's screaming through what you're talking about right now. Like you've got it on your sleeve around
Yeah.
what you're trying to do. Like, is there any highlights strategically that you think have allowed this 20-year sort of win to occur?
My vision's clear to help people embrace emotions to elevate their leadership. I really want to normalize being human at work. So making it okay to be human at work, which means emotions aren't weaknesses. They're data points. They aren't something that should be feared, but they're something that connects and bonds us all. So teaching people that feelings aren't good or bad, right or wrong, but are information, are messengers. I just did a workshop that I was talking about the gifts of each emotion, right? The gift of fear is it keeps us prepared. It made sure I checked my fly before coming on, stepping on stage, right? The gift of doubt, it keeps us humble. It reminds me I'm not the smartest person in the room, right? The gift of anxiety is it scans the future. It warns me of what could go wrong so I can have a contingency plan.
Well, and you can hear your 20 years soaking into a few words at a time. Like
Yeah.
that sounds so eloquent, right? The gift of anxiety.
Yes.
Wait a
Yes.
minute. That's like,
Yes.
that gets me. I'm already, you're flipping me from,
Yeah.
let me
Flipping
just
the script.
thank you
Flip
so
the
much for
script.
putting that so eloquently. That's wonderful. So we've
Yeah.
got your, we've got your vision, which we understand, and
Yeah.
we hear the sort of the goals that you had, and I'm sure the goals are almost unlimited because help a million people, help a billion people, wherever you're sort of headed towards in terms of what you're doing, and you're having these major impacts along the way. Anytime we have a strategy, we need a work plan,
Yeah.
and the work plan we've already heard a couple highlights. If we got that timeline out, let's call it 20 years ago. Do you think '05 is kind of when you got your gears turning? Like, was it 2000, 2000
No,
when
I
it,
think really, to be honest, the seeds were planted, and I talk about this in my book. The seeds were planted in my 20s when I was a high school teacher teaching 18-year-olds. And I was teaching them an entrepreneurship class. And on the first day of class, I had a fist fight between one of the boys and girls in the class. And I thought, here I am, 27 years old, only, a few years older than these kids. How are they going to listen to me, let alone learn from me? And so what I did was I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but what I did was I thought these poor kids, these two kids that were got into the fist fight were troublemakers in the school. So I did what no one what my colleagues thought it was crazy. I made them, it was an entrepreneurship class. I made one of them the VP of production and I made the other one the VP of human resources. And I gave these kids more responsibility than they had ever had. I trusted them. And I worked with them, and they had their emotional and social wobbly bits, let's say. But because I believed in them before they could believe in themselves, it changed things. And that's when I realized when you can connect with people on an emotional level, great things can change. And interestingly enough, Gord, when I was finishing writing this book, thank goodness for social media, I tried to find both of them through Facebook. I found the girl. And she told me, and again, I had no idea this was, I'm 54 now. So this is, 30 years later. She told me what you didn't know is I was in and out of foster homes. And she was a troublemaker. And she said, you know, you stayed with me, you believed in me, and that made all the difference. And she still to this day thanks me for her success now. And now she has her own career. But it was such an amazing 30 years later talking to this student. I had no idea what was going on underneath the surface.
isn't that interesting? So you're having your lived experience, and there's instinctive things that are happening. It's not
Yep.
formed yet, in a
Yep.
sense, right? You've got,
Yeah.
but you've got good instincts. You've got sort of your own bundle and your own life experience coming to that moment,
Yep.
and that thing of doing things that your colleagues didn't think was a good idea. Wait a minute, you can't give those troublemakers, and then but wobbly bits wasn't quite here just yet. The eloquence wasn't there quite yet. When did it start to sort of then shape up?
Okay.
After
Great,
there,
great
yeah.
question. So having been a university professor for so many years, I could see what we were graduating and what we were not teaching. And in the book, I actually, one of the first few chapters, I talk about what I observed in the classroom. So things like students not standing up for themselves and taking the lion's share of the work, students sending snotty emails or texts to other students when they, didn't do what they meet their expectations. Um, And all of these, so I showed all my observations. And then I looked through the data, right? Then my academia came in. Let me see the data that proves what I'm seeing in the classroom. The problem with our modern workforce is what's plaguing our classrooms. Students don't have the emotional and social skills that are needed, yet we're graduating them. So it took me 5 years to lobby to integrate an emotional intelligence in the School of Business. And I'm happy to say, before I retired, because I just retired this last year, now there is an emotional intelligence course in our School of Business, and we're one of the few in Canada and certainly in across North America. But I could see that we're not teaching them to have confidence in themselves, to make decisions when emotions are involved, to set boundaries, to not have so much empathy you get enmeshed in other people's stuff, and you put their needs before yours. I could see all of these things with my students in teaching leadership and organizational behavior, that I thought, you know what? I need to start creating curriculum. And that's when my business really took off. And that was in probably my 30s. So like I've been running my corporation now for 20 years this year. So uh, I really started building courses. And then when the book came out, my speaking career really catapulted. But I have been a corporate trainer for 20 years. And so not only in the workplace, but I still teach in the classroom, students as well as professionals how to build emotional and social
I
skills.
love it. This is really valuable. So now we got seeds in your 20s, in a sense. We get going in your 30s. We're challenging systems. Thank you for doing that. I would
Yeah.
just have a wonderful 10-hour conversation with you from that system challenge alone, because you can hear I'm in the high school setting. I'm going to try something different. I'm in the university setting. I've done an MBA. I did it at the University of Alberta. It was a really good experience overall. But was emotional intelligence offered as a class? It was not. Did they
No.
teach a leadership class? They did. Would they have paid a moment of lip service to it? And it's funny to me when I look out in the world and I see the engineering schools that need your
That.
curriculum, the
Oh yeah.
doctors that need your curriculum, at
Oh
least as
yeah.
something to come out in the world and be semi-rounded, aware of that kind of thing. So I'm glad to hear that you then not only challenged the system, but then got it into, like you said, being one of the few institutions that's going to recognize that
Yes.
because of just that momentum of what those institutions are
And
doing. And yet you're on it shouldn't be the cutting edge, but you are the cutting edge of what is needed. Do you know what I mean? When you
yeah.
say this is the rapid way to access your emotional ability, and then you're very quick to be able to help us locate ourselves you help us find ourselves in what you're
Well,
saying,
that's it.
right?
That's
And
it.
then
It
we can
starts with
then do
that.
something about it. Is that fair?
It starts with that. It's starting with know thyself, right? So we've got to figure out what our emotional makeup default is. Where are we right now? What's our baseline? So for me, I struggle with independence. People are always surprised by that because I run my own company. I'm financially independent. I travel by myself. That's not the kind of independence I'm talking about. I care too much about what people think. It's emotional dependence. I need a lot of validation. Well, where does that come from? I had a beautiful helicopter mother. Unfortunately, she just passed away 2 years ago, just this last weekend. But she was pivotal for me because she loved me so much. She tried to do everything for me. However, because of that, I now, as a 54-year-old, am a little needy. I need a lot of, I care too much what people think. I don't trust all my decisions. I need a lot of validation. So that's one of my wobbly bits. The other wobbly bit is I'm very flexible, too flexible. So I talk about this in the book. There's the dark side of emotional intelligence. So flexibility is a good thing to have, but when you have too much of it, when it's overplayed, you can over accommodate. So those two aren't a great combination, right? When I'm highly over accommodating because I care too much about what people think, what I need to do is be a little bit more stringent and care a little bit less and do what's right, maybe for the business and not necessarily for everyone else so that everyone's happy.
And
I-
again, we're hearing you, thankfully. Let us know from your own experience. You know what I mean? You're out there. You're saying what's really happening with what you've done with all that examination. It's remarkable to me I'm 58 years old, so it's funny to me about my mother-in-law was visiting for the holidays, and she's,
Mm.
she was a water skier when she was in her teens, and did all that sort of glamorous, sort of neat stuff, and beautiful woman, and all this sort of stuff. And what was she saying? She's like, "Oh my goodness, I think I've eaten too much today, and I feel fat." I thought, "You're 83 and beautiful. Like, how can that still be there?" And yet
Yep.
here what we're hearing you say is, "No, no, no, this is just my package."
That's
And
right.
you're not, I don't hear you judging it or feeling bad about it.
No,
You took the time to identify it so you can at least locate yourself when you are wobbly or whatever that is,
that's
so that
right.
it allows you then, but that's that skill set that you're then muscling, you're getting that muscle over to the leaders that you're helping, the audiences that you're helping, and they can find their own way to self-identify and find their strengths. Is that fair?
That's right. And in the book, I give people 60 strategies on how to improve your emotional intelligence, depending which skill you're struggling with. So in my case, it's my independence and flexibility. But in some cases, like for those listeners who are people pleasers out there, anyone a people pleaser, that tends to be when you have high empathy, but not a lot of assertiveness. And so, right, we or when you're a perfectionist, that tends to be when you've on the dark side of self-actualization. It's never enough. You always want bigger, better, more. So it's finding where you are, figuring out. And interesting in the book, the second in chapter 8, I talk about once you think what your wobbly bits are, ask 5 other people. Because the way you see yourself isn't necessarily how others see you.
Yeah,
And
right. And it's funny. I was just in with one of those overly empathetic leaders recently in training setting, and that poor fella just was, working all hours because he was having these overly long conversations with people, but didn't have the self-awareness, I don't think, that he could use your book, where
yes.
he would be able to go in there and identify himself and then find a way out. And this is what I'm hearing over and over again, every minute by minute that we're talking, is you're not just talking about it, you're finding a
Oh
solution that
no.
people can
Yes.
grab onto right away. So now, 20-year overnight success story. You've got the values and the drive to sort of pull all that together. We've got a timeline that's been very, very rich, along with your ability to not only have major moments happen along the way, but also to be a system challenger and a big
Mhm.
thinker that I can't wait to talk to you in your 60s and your 70s, right? Like, this is really interesting foundationally in terms of how much further you're going to go,
Yeah.
because you have kind of unlimited runway because of, you can hear your vision is so strong for where you want to go. Strategy, work plan. The third step is people. And
Yes.
so people, how would you describe your own attitude? If it's 20 years ago ish, how would you say? Has it been easy sailing, or peaks and valleys along the way? How would you describe your own
Uh,
attitude through
that's a
the
great
20 years of
question.
development?
That's a great question. I think if I were to pick a skill that has made me, successful, that I'm no longer just a solopreneur, that I have a legitimate small business, is because I'm brave. I'm brave to go on stage and share because I'm a firm believer in order to build trust, you have to risk first. So I have no problems going on stage sharing my wobbly bits so others feel comfortable to share theirs. I have no problem spending $125,000 on online courses, even though everyone thought I was crazy. Um, because I believed in myself. I'm brave. I take risks, and I believe in my ability. I'm a firm believer that the most wounded are the best healers. I've had a really tough life, Gord. And I think the reason why people don't feel judged by me, because I hear like horror stories, the things that you only hear in movies. These are my clients' stories. And some people have had a really tough life. A lot of people have had a really tough go. And there's no judgment on my part. It's figuring out, unlike my years of therapy where I would talk about the issues and the stories, I never focused on the skills that I was lacking. So, my kind of coaching is, yeah, we'll talk about the story. Tell me about your workplace issue that you're dealing with. But then we right away get into what is the skill that is getting in the way, that's getting you in this predicament. Had I known that independence was my weakest area, I would have done something about it years ago. But I didn't even know. I would just go one story after another story, and I never focused on the skills. So my training, whether it's a course, an online course, a training program for organizations, whether it's a keynote on stage, whether I'm doing executive coaching, it's all skills based and we're building habits. And habits, I don't know about you, but when New Year's comes, right? I want to work out more. I want to quit smoking. I want to, eat healthier. But, January 5th, we're saying, oh, well, that was a stupid idea, right? The only reason Weight Watchers or any of those places work is they make you weigh in every week. And we build habits in our coaching and training programs where people get nudged on a regular basis saying, hey, have you done the thing that you said you were going to do in the class? Because, Gord, people take the class. It's like a honeymoon, right? Like, oh, that was great. It was a wonderful, 8 hours or 2 days. But then they put it on the shelf, the binder, and they forget about it. And they go back to their day-to-day work where they get distracted. You have to always make that your focus, right? What's your North Star? So,
Well, and it sounds like the through line that you said from your own attitude point of view has been the brave part, and then it leads again into this practical get her done
yeah,
thing. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like I suffered and I didn't know. I now know. I'm going to help you know,
yeah,
and we're going to get something done. There's a life is short component in what we're talking about here too, right? There's not everybody's got 30 years to go sit on that psychotherapist couch,
that's right.
right? Because they need some results, especially in the business settings that you're in. They don't have time for. There's not time, and I know
Right.
I've had that interaction where I've talked to therapists, and they're like, "Well, they're going to be ready when they're ready." I'm like, "Yeah, their business needs them right now,
That's
and we
right.
need to get them. We need to get
That's
this
right.
situation moving." There must be other people. Is there one or two other people in your gang that you like to mention along the way that makes 20 years kind of come together?
Well, the one thing I'll just, before I answer that question,
Yeah.
is I always say, once you know better, you got to do better. So I will present them new information, tell them, the difference between frustration and anger, and they'll be like, wow, I never even realized. But then now that you know the difference, now you got to be different with that. So
Now you're responsible for
that's right.
that.
You're
That's a gift. Even if
100%
somebody listening to this
responsible.
podcast right now, wait a second, I heard the difference and then I'm responsible for that. And how do we get that habit into even just taking responsibility?
That's
And it
right.
sounds like you're able to get that done
Yep.
in the
And
settings
in the
that you're
book,
in.
I talk about that. You are 100% responsible for your life. As a university professor, people always ask me, if your students don't do well on the exam, what percentage of the responsibilities should be the teachers? And I always say it's 100% my responsibility. Otherwise, if I say, oh, it was 50% them, 50% me, I'm a victim to the circumstance. If I take 100% responsibility, I come from a place of resourcefulness. To answer your question about the key people along my journey, as I said earlier, my beautiful mother was my most profound mentor. She instilled in me emotional wisdom from an early age, reminding me things like when you point a finger at someone else, three fingers point back at you, or things like associate with people you want to emulate. And she would constantly teach me these valuable lessons, which are incorporated into my books. And I had, I can't necessarily say, I think I was my own champion. I just believed, she believed in me, and I guess that belief in me made me
Yeah,
believe
that
in
sounds good.
myself.
So you've got yourself, the braveness that you've demonstrated along the way, whether it was just a smaller voice and then a voice that's grew, and then thankfully we can hear the confidence that you have coming into what you're doing now, along with having practiced the vulnerability that you need to be in all those different settings. That's a really remarkable combo to come through because you're not masking up and pretending. You're just being yourself and then delivering on the methods that people can put into action right away.
Yeah.
Strategy, work plan, people, operations.
Yes.
So anytime we have a win, we need operational things to occur. Well, operationally, you put some big chunks in place. You learned how to make and produced online courses, and there's an operational component to that. You
Yes.
operationally learned how to write and market a book. You operationally know how to go and speak at conferences around the world and do your
Yeah.
thing in terms of what you're doing. There's all these different operational things that you picked up along the way. Any operational highlights? Like, is it process driven? Any highlights that you'd like to point out along the way, or what do you think?
I think for me, I'd say my biggest operational element that helped me succeed is I know how to build curriculum. With all my education, two of my degrees are in education. I know how people learn and I know how to make behavior stick. And so I build curriculum, whether that's in our coaching programs where we have a very structured program, whether it's a six session program or 12 session, or if it's a year-long training program. It is built with curriculum in mind. I guess that's just, I breathe. Like, I build curriculum as easily as I breathe. And uh, I think that would probably
And
be
and
a
and
great
and there's
element.
there's a systems element to that. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's not just education curriculum you're thinking actually about organizationally, and then you're tying that back. You can hear it into the leaders that you're dealing with, no matter what level of the organization that you're dealing with along the way. Plus, you picked up all these other skills along the way, and I can't imagine what other skills we're going to be learning about in 10 years that you'll have picked up along the way operationally as well. Strategy,
Yeah.
work plan, people, operations. Finally, there's results. So there's quantitative results and qualitative results. Quantitatively, would you say that you've reached thousands,
Oh, yeah.
tens of thousands, million? Like how many
Oh,
people have you reached with your
a
message?
lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. But in single-handedly, I have trained just in the last 7 years alone 75,000 professionals,
Right?
just in my workshops. So,
Just
like,
in your work,
people,
just in your
just
workshops, in
not
small
even in my
settings, big
keynote.
settings,
Yeah, yeah,
one-on-ones, you've been
yeah,
on largest
yeah,
stages, you've done
yeah,
all these high impact things.
yeah.
You can see even just brushing by some of the events that you're at even this year, like your event level, you're leveling up in terms of what you're doing there. So you've reached easily 100,000 plus people or more, either directly or not, but then indirectly through these other ways that you're sort of reaching people, whether they're spreading your message or, someone's buying your book for someone else or whatever. Massive
Yes.
impacts that way. I don't mean to say on the numbers side, you're making a living. Do you know what I mean? You said your business is scaled up to a
Yes.
level where you've
Yeah.
got it, you said it's a business now. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to dig into that part, but there's some dollars involved.
Yep.
There's a number of events per year or more. Like, would you say your opportunities are growing every year as
Oh,
well?
yeah,
Is it that
yeah,
kind of
the
thing?
stages get bigger, the audiences get bigger, the clients get bigger, and interestingly, some of my biggest clients, which is obviously I can't share all of them, but, you can check out my website to see sort of our client list, but some of them don't even allow me to share publicly because they're such big clients, they don't, want their names,
Well, and I think maybe that's a
publicized.
reflection also of the nature of your work,
Yes,
perhaps
it's
as well.
very deep, it's very
So
deep
your
work.
work is
Yep,
personal work, and
yeah,
so, but again,
yeah,
you would have. What's neat is you said, well, check out the website, and you would see where emotional impact
yeah.
gets well utilized, and those are smart leadership teams if they're
And
able to round out in that way.
think of you said it earlier, and I apologize. I don't know if you can hear Cosmo, my dog, in the background
It's
squeaking his
okay.
toy, but he just decided to come on to the podcast to make sure he's seen. But the other thing you mentioned, engineering. A lot of our clients are in the STEM, science, tech, engineering, math. Right?
Right.
People that have incredible technical skills, but not necessarily good bedside manners, right?
Well, and I'm
Emotional
seeing
and
that
social
also in the
skills.
technology space, certainly
Yeah,
in Alberta, where I've spent a bunch of time.
yeah,
Genius people, not able to necessarily convey what they're trying to convey,
yeah.
and the emotions, not explored. And so, again, you're creating those opportunities in the STEM space. Love it. And again, it sounds like you'll be reaching at any part. People entering, people, at the highest levels of whatever they're doing to run their organization. So, strategy, work plan, people, operations, results. Heard the quantitative thing. 20-year overnight success story, maybe 30, maybe 35. Um, how does it feel to sort of take a moment to go, wow, that's the win? How's it feel to get this far?
Fulfilled. A lot of people, when they ask, how does it feel? People say good. Well, good is not a feeling. So I want to, in case anyone was thinking I was going to answer with the word good is not a feeling. I feel fulfilled. I feel like I am living my purpose and of why I was put on this planet. I think, growing up, having a tough life, I used to be upset about it. And now I think it's one of my greatest gifts because I understand what real pain feels like. And I understand, growing up, I was told I was too emotional. Well, guess what? I'm making a friggin' living out of it now. So, helping people feel seen and safe in expressing their emotions at work is one of the intangible results that this job provides me. Shifting workplace cultures to become more emotionally aware and emotionally sensitive to cultural differences, generational differences, and changing the narrative around leadership, right? I think that whole command and control doesn't work in this modern age, where we were supposed to come in and be stoic and unflappable and never let them see you sweat. Doesn't work. And people want to talk about emotions that doesn't necessarily, not all people, but certainly the younger generation wants to talk about it more than the older generation. And the older generation that is leading that younger generation need to get comfortable. That doesn't mean you get comfortable getting uncomfortable. It doesn't mean you have to be anyone's emotional therapist, but you do need to be brave enough to ask these 3 questions. What are you feeling? What is that feeling telling you about you, others, and the situation? And how can I support you? That's it. And then once people feel safe and seen and valued, that's going to impact their dedication and commitment to their work. And it's not just about bigger paychecks. And interesting. I just read an article saying that the younger generation, 62% want face-to-face feedback. But yet 80% of people right now are cowering around having a difficult conversation at work with anyone. So, we need to, how can we create incredible workplaces when we can't even talk to each other? So it's so much more about ROI. It's more about ROR, right? Return on relationships with yourself, relationship with others. When people feel understood, productivity improves, collaboration improves, and innovation thrives. So we've got to make people feel seen and understood and valued.
I think we've gone over our 15 minutes with you. Do you know what I mean? And we're just getting, it's just, and I think you know this very intentionally. It's sort of, you're trying to deliver value, and every minute you get a chance to speak, and that's just so lucky for the audience. That's and me directly. Funny enough, I'm going to have to go back and replay the 1, 2, 3 that you just gave me there, because that's
Yeah.
really, really valuable. So
Yeah.
you feel fulfilled at the end of all that. You've got this 20-year overnight success story, which is it's actually going to go a lot longer because you've got a lot of
Oh, yeah.
runway. You
Oh,
might
yeah.
even be mid-career or less right now, from what I'm hearing, for
Yeah.
how far you can
I got
take
lots
this.
more to do and
Absolutely,
I want
and
to
a
have a
lot more
lot more
impact to
impact.
have. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
one thing I'll just leave behind is, do you have a couple sentences for leaders that you like to leave behind, for leaders that are getting into learning about emotional intelligence? Just a couple things to take us out, that if you had a chance to say, here's a few things that I want you to remember to dig into, and how you can make that to improve, how you can use that to improve your own leadership.
I think the first thing is really start with some self-reflection and examine your strengths and areas for development. I think it's taking a good, honest look in the mirror and really figuring out what your emotional makeup is. Am I aware of how I feel in a moment? Do I stand up for myself? Can I see things from other people's perspectives? And then the other thing I want leaders to do is to ask yourself, how do people feel in my presence? When you're in a good mood, I'm sure people feel great. But what happens when you're stressed? Do people feel comfortable when you're stressed? Do they feel okay to challenge your ideas when you're stressed? Do they tiptoe around you and placate because they're worried about how you might, the wrath that might come out? So I think it's really being aware, zooming out, being the observer of ourselves and seeing ourselves from of above. And one of my clients gave me this idea. I wish I could say I came up with it, but on his garage door, before he leaves the house, he puts this sticky note on his garage door, and it asks, how am I showing up today? My add-on to that is put it on the other side of the garage door when you come home after you've depleted your energy from all the people you worked with all day long to the people you love. How are you showing up to them, to your daughter, to your partner, to your dog? How are you showing up? And I think if we could zoom out and see that we all leave an emotional wake like a boat leaves a wake. What's my emotional makeup? What's my default? What's my baseline? What are my wobbly bits that I need to work on? Zoom out, really be the observer of yourself. Do what I did when you made a mistake, own it, right? Because we're not perfect, we're human, and that's okay, but own your mistakes.
And
Those
I
would
can
be
hear,
sort of
I can hear in there the sticky note needs to go on both sides of the garage door if you want to be a better leader. And then people are going to have to get a transcript of this, and it's your next book if they took the
There
transcript out
you
of here.
go. There
But the
you
big
go.
thing is they do need to, if they have to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So they can reach me at Carolyn at carolynstern.com if they want to email me directly. I have two websites. One, carolynstern.com, which is it's my speaking page and my thought leadership, and EI Experience, which is our corporate training where we do coaching, retreats, assessments. People online might be interested in taking an EQ assessment. I know for me, 25 years ago, it changed my life. On the outside, I thought I had it all together, but inside, I had a lot of wobbly bits that I need to work on. And 25 years later, I have to tell you that my EQ has gone up. Hopefully, thank God.
You
Uh,
learned you learned a few things in
I
there, and so
learned a few
again,
things
we've
along the
learned
way.
a ton. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show here today, sharing so generously, and then again, even at the end here, we know where to get some answers, and
Yes.
that's just a real gift that you're doing over and over again. Carolyn, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Normalize being human at work. Be brave and help leaders realize that investing in emotional intelligence will pay off big time. That is how Carolyn Stern wins every day. Thank you, Carolyn, for your inspiring win. Now, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, then make sure to check out our upcoming episodes, which include How to Build a Successful Chamber of Commerce, Winning with Doug Griffiths, CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. And if you are a leader who really wants to learn how the Executive Wins coaching session can help you to grow your confidence and inspire your team, then visit executivewins.com to learn how. You can also subscribe to the Executive Wins newsletter to stay up to date on the podcast, live events, education opportunities, and more. Visit executivewins.com/newsletter to sign up. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and share it with a fellow leader. And don't forget to check out our resources and links in the show notes. And keep listening to the Executive Wins podcast for more inspiring wins that will help you to grow yourself, your team, and your entire business. Thanks for listening to the Executive Wins podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe as we bring you more inspiring wins from outstanding leaders so you can grow your business.